Fairy tales were a luxury I simply couldn't afford. Scraping together loose change for my son's inhaler on 4 hours of sleep turned Prince Charming into nothing more than a looming eviction notice. Or so I thought, until a billionaire slid a contract across the table. The position was playing his wife, but the real compensation was the money to save my little boy. The smell of old fryer grease doesn't just stick to your clothes. It gets into your DNA. I scrubbed the laminate counter of booth 4, pressing hard enough to turn my knuckles white. A dollop of dried ketchup clung stubbornly to the edge. I chipped at it with my thumbnail. It was 11:14 p.m. The diner was empty except for a trucker asleep in the corner and Brenda, the shift manager, counting singles in the register. My feet were numb. That was a blessing. When the numbness wore off, usually around the time I walked the 4 blocks from the bus stop to my apartment, the pain would bloom, sharp, hot needles shooting up my calves. "You're off, Claire," Brenda yelled without looking up. "Take the leftover meatloaf. It's just going to go in the trash." "Thanks, Brenda." I grabbed the styrofoam container, swapped my stained apron for a heavy winter coat that was 2 sizes too big, and pushed through the glass doors. The Chicago wind hit me like a physical blow. I ducked my chin, shoved my hands deep into my pockets, and walked. There was a rhythm to my life, a brutal, unforgiving cadence. Job 1. The diner. 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. Job 2. Freelance data entry. Done on my cracked smartphone during my commutes in the quiet hours of the night. Job 3. Commercial cleaning. 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. 3 jobs. 104 hours a week. And it still wasn't enough. My apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that smelled permanently of boiled cabbage and damp carpet. I unlocked the door as quietly as possible. The hinges shrieked anyway. Mrs. Gable, my neighbor and makeshift babysitter, was asleep on the sofa, the television playing a late-night infomercial at a low volume. I touched her shoulder. "Mrs. Gable, I'm back." She blinked, adjusting her thick glasses. "Oh, Claire, right. Sam was good. Ate his peas. Coughed a bit around 8, but the inhaler settled him down." My stomach tightened. The red inhaler or the blue one? The blue. The rescue inhaler. I handed Mrs. Gable $20, exactly half of my tips from the night. She tucked it into her cardigan and shuffled out the door. I walked into the tiny bedroom. Sam was 5 years old, a small, fragile weight buried under a pile of frayed blankets. His chest rose and fell with a slight wheeze. I stood there, listening to his breathing. It was the only sound in the world that mattered. I pulled out my phone and checked my bank app. The screen glowed harshly in the dark. $42.18. Rent was due in 6 days. Sam's specialist appointment, the one I had pushed back twice already, was next Tuesday. The copay was $150. If he needed a refill on the steroid medication, that was another $80. The math didn't work. It never worked. You can't budget your way out of a deficit this deep. You just tread water until your arms give out. I went into the kitchen, opened the styrofoam container, and ate cold meatloaf over the sink. At 1:30 a.m., I sat at the wobbly kitchen table, opened the data entry portal on my phone, and began typing out medical transcriptions. My eyes burned. The words blurred into meaningless shapes. Hypertension, tachycardia, ischemia. At 3:15 a.m., I closed my eyes. Just for a second. The alarm screamed at 3:30 a.m. I jerked awake, a spike of panic hitting my chest. I had 15 minutes to wash my face, change into my blue cleaning scrubs, and catch the early train downtown. This was the grind. It didn't care if I was tired. It didn't care that my son was sick. It only demanded motion. The Hayes Building was a 60-story monument to glass, steel, and money. It was the headquarters of Hayes Global, a logistics empire that owned half the shipping routes on the eastern seaboard. I didn't care about their profit margins. I cared about the trash cans on floors 40 through 50. I clocked in at the basement loading dock, grabbed my cart, and rode the service elevator up. The building was dead silent, a sterile vacuum. The carpets were thick, swallowing the sound of my footsteps. By 6 a.m., my lower back was a tight, coiled spring of agony. I was vacuuming the 48th floor, the executive suites. These offices were massive, walled with glass overlooking the waking city. The desks were slabs of dark mahogany. I pushed the heavy industrial vacuum into the corner office. The plaque on the door read, Liam Hayes, Chief Executive Officer. I had cleaned this office a dozen times. It was always impeccably neat. No family photos, no personal items. Just a sleek, expensive machine of a room. I turned off the vacuum. The sudden silence was heavy. I leaned against the handle, rubbing my temples. My vision swam. The lack of sleep was catching up to me, pulling at my limbs like gravity turned up to 11. I looked at the leather sofa against the far wall. It looked softer than my bed. Just sit for a minute, my brain whispered. 1 minute. The floor is clean. The trash is empty. Just let your feet stop hurting for 60 seconds. I walked over. I sat down. The leather yielded perfectly. I let my head fall back against the cushion. I closed my eyes. I just needed 1 minute. Usually, my employees prefer to sleep at their desks. It looks slightly more productive. My eyes snapped open. The voice was deep, quiet, and carried the kind of authority that didn't need to shout to be heard. I scrambled up, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack them. The room was no longer dark. The gray light of dawn was spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. A man stood by the mahogany desk. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my annual income. His tie was loosened, and he held a ceramic coffee mug. He looked to be in his late 30s, with sharp, rigid features and dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it all night. Liam Hayes. I looked at the wall clock. 6:45 a.m. I had been asleep for 45 minutes. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. Fired. I'm fired. Job 3 is gone. Mr. Hayes, I stopped. What was I going to say? That I was sorry? That I was tired? Men like him didn't care about tired. I apologize. It won't happen again. I grabbed the handle of my vacuum, keeping my eyes fixed on the carpet. I just needed to get out of the room before he called security. Leave the vacuum, he said. I froze. Sir, I need to finish the floor. The floor's clean. Sit down. I looked up. He was watching me. His eyes were a pale, icy blue. There was no anger in them, no indignation, just a cold, calculating curiosity. I prefer to stand, I said. It was a stupid, defensive instinct. But when you have absolutely no power, you cling to the tiny things, like refusing to sit when ordered to. He took a sip of his coffee. He didn't seem bothered by my refusal. He leaned back against the edge of his desk, crossing his ankles. You wear a name tag, he said, but it's blank. The plastic fell off. My name is Claire Daniels. Who do you work for, Claire Daniels? Apex Cleaning Solutions. We're contracted. I know who we contract, he said smoothly. He set the mug down. What I want to know is why a contracted cleaner is sleeping on my sofa at 6 in the morning, smelling faintly of... He paused, taking a deliberate breath. Cheap cooking oil. I stiffened. The diner grease. I had scrubbed my skin raw in the shower yesterday, but it never really washed out. I have another job, I said, my voice flat. I came straight from a shift. I sat down for a moment. I closed my eyes. It was a mistake. I will pack up my cart and report to my supervisor for termination. Did I say you were terminated? You don't have to. I know how this works. I grabbed the vacuum cord and gave it a sharp yank, unplugging it from the wall. The cord snapped back, coiling around my feet. I knelt to gather it, my movements jerky and rushed. I just wanted to leave. I needed to figure out how to replace the $300 a week this job brought in. You're angry, he observed. I'm awake, I shot back, standing up. There's a difference. Liam Hayes tilted his head. He looked at my hands. They were red. The skin cracked around the knuckles from industrial bleach and dishwater. He looked at my shoes. They were cheap canvas sneakers, the soles worn dangerously thin. You're not terrified, he said almost to himself. Most people who get caught sleeping in the CEO's office are terrified. You're just calculating. I'm calculating how I'm going to pay rent now that you're going to fire me, I said, the filter between my brain and my mouth completely disintegrating. Exhaustion does that. It burns away the pleasantries. So, if we're done here, Mr. Hayes, I have a cart to put away. I pushed the vacuum toward the door. Leave the vacuum, he repeated, his voice dropping a fraction of an octave. It wasn't a request. I stopped. I turned to face him. How many jobs do you have, Claire? He asked. 3. Why? Because I like the variety, I snapped. Why do you think? I have a son. He likes to eat. He likes to breathe. Breathing is expensive. I braced myself for the reprimand, the lecture on professionalism. But Liam just stared at me. The silence stretched, heavy and strange. The city below was waking up, the faint hum of traffic vibrating against the glass. He pushed off the desk, walked over to a leather briefcase sitting on a side table, and pulled out a sleek, embossed business card. He walked toward me. I held my ground, though every instinct told me to step back. He was taller up close, intimidating, but deeply tired. There were faint, dark smudges under his eyes, masked by the sharp cut of his jaw. He held out the card. Don't report to your supervisor, he said. Finish your shift. Go home. Sleep. Call this number at exactly 2 o'clock this afternoon. I looked at the card. It was thick, heavy stock. Liam Hayes, direct line. Why? I asked, suspicious. Because I have a vacancy to fill, he said softly. And I think you might be uniquely qualified. I don't have a college degree, Mr. Hayes. I clean floors and serve meatloaf. I don't need a degree. I need someone who understands the value of a brutal transaction. 2 o'clock, Claire. He walked past me, opening the door to his office. The meeting was over. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the small white square in my hand. It felt like a trap. Rich men don't hand out lifelines to women holding industrial vacuums. They hand out anchors. But as I looked at the card, all I could see was the math. Rent, inhalers, copays. I put the card in my pocket. The number on the card didn't go to a receptionist. It rang twice before Liam answered. Hayes. It's Claire Daniels, I said. I was standing in the alley behind the diner, surrounded by overflowing dumpsters. It was the only place quiet enough to make a call before my shift started at 3. The smell of garbage was a sharp contrast to the memory of his sterile, glass-walled office. "You're punctual." "Good." His voice came through the speaker, crisp and entirely businesslike. "Are you working right now?" "My shift starts in 40 minutes. Call in sick." "I don't get sick days, Mr. Hayes. If I don't show up, I don't get paid. If I don't get paid, I don't make rent. So unless this phone call is going to deposit $300 into my account, I need to go inside." A brief silence. "Text me your banking routing number." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Text me the numbers, then walk away from the diner. A black car will be waiting for you on the corner of 5th and Main in 10 minutes. He hung up. I stared at the phone. It was insane. It was a scam, or a joke, or something worse. But I remembered the cold, analytical look in his eyes that morning. He wasn't a man who wasted time on jokes. My fingers moved almost on their own, typing out my routing and account numbers. I hit send. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A notification from my banking app. Incoming transfer. $5,000. My knees actually buckled. I leaned back against the brick wall of the alley, sliding down until I hit a milk crate. $5,000. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. It was more money than I had seen in one place in 2 years. It was rent for months. It was a dozen specialist appointments. It was a mountain of blue inhalers. I stood up, untied my apron, and threw it into the nearest dumpster. The Blacktown car was exactly where he said it would be. The driver held the door open for me. I slid into the leather interior, feeling acutely aware of my worn jeans and faded sweater. We didn't go back to the Hayes building. The car drove north, into a neighborhood where the houses sat behind iron gates and high hedges. We pulled up to a massive modern estate made of concrete, glass, and dark wood. The driver escorted me to the front door, which opened before we reached it. Liam stood there. He was no longer in a suit. He wore dark slacks and a black cashmere sweater, looking entirely at ease in the cavernous space. "Come in," he said. I stepped into the foyer. The house was beautiful, but it felt like a museum. Nothing was out of place. It lacked the chaos of living. He led me into a massive study. A fire was burning in the grate, casting long shadows across the room. 2 leather armchairs sat facing each other over a low glass table. On the table rested a thick manila folder. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs. I sat. The chair swallowed me. I kept my back straight, my hands folded in my lap. "You sent me $5,000. "A consultation fee," he replied, taking the seat opposite me. "For your time. My time isn't worth $5,000 an hour. It is to me, because I need a problem solved, and I need it solved quietly, quickly, and with absolute compliance." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, clasping his hands together. "Hayes Global is going public in 6 months, Liam said, his voice dropping into the steady rhythm of a boardroom pitch. "It's a multi-billion-dollar IPO. The board of directors is notoriously conservative. Currently, they are pushing back on my controlling shares. They claim I am a liability." "Are you?" I asked. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was a dangerous, cynical smile. "I am single. I am 38. The tabloids enjoy documenting my private life. The board views this as instability. They want a family man at the helm. They want a narrative. A grounded, respectable CEO who goes home to his wife and child." He pointed a finger at the manila folder. Inside that folder is a non-disclosure agreement and a marriage contract. The air in the room seemed to vanish. I stopped breathing. I stared at the folder, then up at him. A what? A marriage contract, Liam repeated, his tone entirely level. Valid for exactly 2 years. During that time, you will reside in this house. You will attend public and private functions as my wife. You will pose for photographs. You will smile. You will act as the stabilizing anchor my board demands. You're out of your mind. I am pragmatic, he countered smoothly. I don't have time to date. I don't have the patience to court someone from my social circle who will expect genuine affection, or worse, half my assets when the arrangement concludes. I need an employee, someone who understands that this is a job. So you picked the cleaning lady. I picked a woman who works 3 jobs to keep her son breathing, he corrected, his eyes locking onto mine. The intensity of his gaze pinned me to the chair. I had a background check run on you this morning. You have $42 in your bank account. You have $18,000 in medical debt. Your son, Sam, has severe chronic asthma. You are desperate, Claire. But you are also tough, unyielding, and incredibly protective. I felt exposed, stripped down to the bare wires of my life. Anger flared, hot and protective. You have no right to look into my son. I am evaluating a candidate for a crucial position, he said, unapologetic. Here are my terms. If you sign that contract, your medical debt is erased by sundown. Sam will be added to my private health care plan. He will see the best pediatric pulmonologists in the country. You will receive a monthly salary of $20,000. And at the end of the 2 years, when the contract dissolves, you will walk away with $2 million tax-free. I stared at him. My mind was reeling, spinning out of control. $2 million, I whispered. $2 million, he confirmed. Plus whatever you save from your salary. You will never have to scrub a floor again. You will never have to count the pennies for an inhaler. And what do I have to do? I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to keep it steady. Really do. Live here. Accompany me to dinners. Memorize a fabricated backstory about how we met. Deflect the press. He paused, his expression hardening. And strictly maintain the boundaries of this arrangement. There will be no physical intimacy. We will have separate bedrooms. We will be colleagues playing a role. That is all. It was a transaction. A cold, bloodless transaction. He was buying my life for 2 years. Why me? I asked. You could hire an actress, someone who knows how to perform. Actresses want fame. They leak stories. They get greedy, Liam said, leaning back. You don't care about fame, Claire. You care about survival. You understand a contract. You won't fall in love with me because you're too cynical for romance. And I won't fall in love with you. He slid a silver pen across the glass table. It stopped an inch from my hand. Read the contract. Have a lawyer look at it if you want. I'll cover the fees. I looked at the pen. I looked at the fire dancing in the grate. I thought about the smell of the diner. I thought about the pain in my arches. Then I thought about Sam. I thought about the way his chest hitched when he couldn't get enough air. I thought about the $150 copay that had been keeping me awake for weeks. I didn't need a lawyer to read a lifeline. When you're drowning, you don't check the brand of the life preserver. You just grab it. I picked up the pen. The metal was cool against my skin. One condition, I said. My voice was steady now. The panic was gone, replaced by the cold, hard instinct that had kept me alive this long. Liam raised an eyebrow. Negotiating already, I like that. What is it? Sam's schooling. I want him enrolled in the Brighton Academy. Full tuition paid, separate from my salary. It was the most elite private school in the city. The kind of place with small class sizes, on-site nurses, and a campus that looked like a fortress. Liam didn't blink. Done. I pulled the folder toward me. I flipped past the dense legalese to the final page. I didn't read the clauses. I didn't read the stipulations. I just found the line with my name printed beneath it. I signed it. I closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. When do I start? I asked. Liam looked at the signature, then up at me. For a moment, the heavy, tired look in his eyes seemed to lift, just a fraction. Pack your things, my new husband said. Your shift begins tonight. Poverty is loud. It's the screech of failing brake pads on the bus, the rattle of a dying refrigerator, the coughing fits that shake a thin mattress at 2 a.m. Wealth, I quickly learned, is completely silent. My new bedroom in Liam's estate had blackout curtains thick enough to stop a bullet and a mattress that absorbed sound and motion. The first 3 nights, I barely slept. The quiet was deafening. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Brenda to yell at me to wipe down booth 4, for the eviction notice to slide under the heavy oak door. But the only thing that slid under the door was a daily itinerary printed on heavy stock paper by Liam's assistant. 10 a.m. wardrobe fitting. 1 p.m. PR briefing. 6 p.m. charity gala at the Field Museum. The transition wasn't magical. It was surgical. Liam's PR team didn't try to turn me into a high society debutante. They were smarter than that. They built a narrative around my actual life, heavily sanitized. I wasn't the cleaning lady who fell asleep in his office. I was a hard-working, dedicated single mother who met the CEO through a philanthropic outreach program. I was grounded. I was his anchor. The most jarring change wasn't the silk dresses or the diamond ring that felt as heavy as a handcuff. It was Sam. Within a week, a team of specialists had overhauled my son's treatment plan. He had preventative medications that cost more than a used car. The estate had central air with hospital-grade HEPA filters. One evening, about a month into the contract, I walked into Sam's room. He was building a massive Lego tower on the thick carpet. I stood in the doorway, listening. Nothing. No wheeze, no rattle, just the steady, rhythmic intake of clean air. I sat down on the floor next to him and cried. It wasn't a delicate cinematic cry. It was ugly, shoulder-heaving relief. For the first time in 5 years, the anvil had been lifted off my chest. "You okay, Mom?" Sam asked, pausing his construction. "I'm perfect, buddy," I whispered, wiping my face with the sleeve of a cashmere sweater I hadn't paid for. "I just really like Legos." I owed Liam Hayes. I owed him a performance of a lifetime. My debut test came 3 days later at a fundraising dinner. The ballroom was a sea of bespoke tuxedos and designer gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roasted pheasant. I stood beside Liam, a fixed, pleasant smile plastered on my face, a glass of champagne untouched in my hand. Liam played his part flawlessly. He kept a hand on the small of my back, a light, proprietary touch that communicated intimacy to the room without crossing the physical boundaries we had agreed upon. "Don't grip your glass so tight," he murmured, leaning down so his breath barely brushed my ear. To the photographers, it looked like a lover's whisper. "You're going to shatter the crystal." I loosened my fingers. I'm used to holding thick diner mugs. Give me a break. A dry chuckle vibrated in his chest. You're doing fine. Just not at whatever Richard says. He's the problem. Richard was Richard Vance's polar opposite. Wait, no. Let's call him Arthur. Arthur Penhaligon. He was the chairman of the board, a man whose skin looked like cured leather and who possessed a smile that never reached his eyes. He approached us like a shark circling a life raft. Liam, Arthur boomed, extending a hand, and the mysterious Claire. We were beginning to think Liam had invented you to keep us off his back. I assure you, Arthur, I'm quite real, I said, taking his hand. His grip was a dominance play, too tight, too long. Fascinating, Arthur drawled, looking me up and down with undisguised calculation. Liam tells me you have a background in data management? He knew. Liam's background check was thorough, but board members had their own spies. Arthur knew about the diner. He knew about the mop bucket. He was waiting for me to flinch. I didn't. When you've dealt with drunken patrons throwing loose change at your head at midnight, a billionaire's subtle condescension barely registers. I handle multi-tiered scheduling and logistics across varied sectors, I said evenly. It required a high tolerance for chaos and an ability to spot inefficiencies. Much like managing a corporate board, I imagine. Liam's hand twitched against my back. Arthur's smile thinned. Indeed. Well, it's quite the leap. From your varied sectors to the apex of Hayes Global. One hopes the altitude doesn't make you dizzy. I found the view is pretty much the same, I replied, taking a slow sip of my champagne. People still want what they want. The only difference is the price of the dinner. Arthur stared at me for a long, quiet second. Then he let out a sharp bark of laughter. She has teeth, Liam. I'll give her that. Keep this one. He turned and melted back into the crowd. Liam let out a slow exhale. He dropped his hand from my back and looked at me, a genuine spark of respect in his icy blue eyes. Data management? He asked. It sounded better than I typed medical charts while waiting for the bus, I said. You handled him better than my legal team does. Liam looked out over the ballroom, the tight line of his jaw relaxing just a fraction. Thank you. Don't thank me, I said, setting the champagne flute on a passing waiter's tray. I'm on the clock. It's just a job. Right, Liam said. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by the sterile professionalism we both relied on. Just a job. 6 months. That's how long it takes for a performance to bleed into reality. The IPO was scheduled for November. As the date approached, the pressure in the estate grew dense. Liam was working 20-hour days. He paced his study at 3 a.m., firing off emails, running numbers, negotiating with unseen enemies over a headset. I knew the signs of a person drowning. I used to see it in the mirror every day. It was a Tuesday night, raining hard enough to blur the Chicago skyline visible through the living room windows. I was up, as usual. My body still hadn't completely forgotten the 4 a.m. cleaning shifts. I walked into the massive, pristine kitchen to get a glass of water. Liam was sitting at the marble island. No suit. Just a white t-shirt and gray sweatpants. He had a glass of scotch in one hand and was rubbing the bridge of his nose with the other. A stack of financial reports sat ignored in front of him. He looked exhausted. Not just physically, but hollowed out. I didn't turn around and leave. I walked to the fridge, poured a glass of cold water, and sat on the stool across from him. We sat in silence for a long time. The sound of the rain lashing against the glass filled the empty space. The board is threatening a vote of no confidence, Liam said suddenly. His voice was raspy. He didn't look at me. He looked at the amber liquid in his glass. Arthur has rallied 3 other members. They want to delay the public offering, push me into a ceremonial role, and put their own puppet in the CEO chair. Can they do that? If they have the votes, yes. I built this company, Claire. I took it from a failing regional freight line to a global network. I gave up everything. My 20s, my 30s, any semblance of a life. He let out a bitter laugh. I even bought a wife to appease them, and it still isn't enough. He took a slow drink. They look at me and they just see a machine, he said. Machines can be replaced. I traced the rim of my water glass. I thought about Brenda at the diner. I thought about the supervisor at the cleaning company who fired a woman for taking a 15-minute break to call her sick kid. They don't see a machine, Liam, I said quietly. They see someone who cares too much, and they're using it against you. He finally looked up at me. What do you mean? Arthur knows you love this company. He knows you'll tear yourself apart trying to protect it. That makes you predictable. You're playing by their rules. You're trying to prove you're respectable, stable, safe. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the cold marble. Stop being safe. Claire, this is corporate finance, not a street fight. It's all a street fight, I countered, my voice hardening. Power is power. You're letting Arthur hold the threat of the vote over your head. Why? Because if he calls the vote, I lose. Then don't let him call it. Make it cost him. I looked at the reports on the table. I spent 5 years cleaning executive offices. I emptied trash cans. I vacuumed under desks. You know what I learned? Men like Arthur are sloppy. They think the people beneath them are invisible. They leave things out. They make mistakes. Liam frowned, his analytical mind kicking into gear. Go on. He's been delaying the IPO. Why? Because the current valuation is too high? Or because he wants to buy up cheap shares through a proxy before it hits the open market? Liam froze. The scotch glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Insider trading. I don't know the terminology. I just know human nature. He's a greedy man. Greedy men don't stall money unless they figure out a way to pocket a larger share of it. Liam stared at me. The dead, exhausted look in his eyes was instantly gone, replaced by a sharp, terrifying focus. He pulled his laptop toward him and flipped it open, his fingers flying across the keys. If I cross-reference Arthur's private holding companies with the short sell patterns over the last quarter, Liam muttered, his eyes tracking rapidly across the screen, it would be buried. Layers of shell companies. But, yes, there. A massive influx of capital into a blind trust based in the Caymans. Timed perfectly with his initial pushback on the IPO. He slammed the laptop shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the quiet kitchen. It's circumstantial, Liam said, but his breathing was shallow. But it's enough to trigger an SEC investigation. If I casually mention this to Arthur, the resulting panic will destroy him. He looked at me. It wasn't the look of a boss evaluating an employee. It was the look of a man who had finally found a partner in a trench. You're terrifying, he said softly. I'm a mother who knows how to survive, I replied. You gave me the resources to keep my son alive. The least I can do is help you keep your company. I stood up, taking my empty glass to the sink. Claire, I stopped and looked back. Liam had stood up as well. He closed the distance between us, stopping just a foot away. For a year, we had lived in a carefully choreographed dance. We touched for the cameras. We smiled for the crowds. In private, we maintained a massive, unbreachable distance. But right now, the distance felt artificial. "The contract expires in 6 months," he said. His voice was low, stripped of its usual commanding edge. "I know. Your $2 million is already in escrow. You've earned it." He hesitated, a rare vulnerability flashing across his rigid features. "But I don't want you to leave." My heart did a strange, painful stutter in my chest. I fell back on my cynical armor. "Are you offering me a promotion, Mr. Hayes?" "I'm offering to rip the contract up," Liam said. He reached out, his fingers lightly brushing the back of my hand where it rested on the counter. The touch was electric, grounded, real. "I don't need an anchor anymore. I need a partner. And frankly, I don't think I can run this empire without you." I looked at his hand. Then I looked up into his eyes. There were no grand declarations of burning passion. We were both too bruised, too pragmatic for fairy tales. But there was profound respect. There was safety. There was a shared understanding of what it took to build a life out of nothing. "Sam likes his school," I said slowly. Liam smiled, a real, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. "And I like Sam. I also like having someone around who reminds me that I'm just a man, not a machine." I turned my hand over, interlocking my fingers with his. The skin on my knuckles was still a little rough, a permanent scar from the diner. His thumb brushed over it gently. "Okay," I whispered. "No contract." We didn't kiss, not yet. We just stood there in the quiet kitchen, listening to the rain, two survivors who had finally stopped calculating the math of drowning and started learning how to swim together. Did Claire's brutal honesty and street-smart tactics surprise you? If you loved watching this fierce single mom turn a fake marriage into a real empire, hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that grit is worth more than gold. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deeply emotional, grounded stories where the underdogs win on their own terms. Drop a comment below. What would you do with the $2 million?